Welcome to the Rock Fight, where we speak our truth, slay sacred cows, and sometimes agree to disagree. This is an outdoor podcast that aims for the head. It's Wednesday, November 29th, and nearly 2 weeks ago, the Bureau of Economic Analysis released a report that measures the impact of outdoor recreation in the United States, the summary of which is that the cumulative value of going outside here in the US of A is $1.1 trillion. The news of the monetary size of the outdoors was celebrated by political action organizations, trade groups of the activities mentioned in the report, as well as the typical players in outdoor media. But what's actually in this report? Because the definition of outdoor as defined by the Bureau of Economic Analysis is vast and includes categories you are certainly not expecting to be in this thing. And as you might expect, most outdoor media outlets have been happy to report the big trillion-dollar number and just move on. Fortunately, independent journalist and regular here on The Rock Fight, Kyle Frost, took the time to dig into the report and shed some light on what it all means for his newsletter and website, hereandthere.club. And Kyle's back here on The Rock Fight today to talk about what's in this groundbreaking report, the impact it will surely have on the outdoor industry and community, as well as the lackluster response from the outdoor media. So let's get into it. I'm Colin True. Welcome back to The Rock Fight, where today it's the big trillion-dollar report and what it all means with Kyle Frost.
Welcome to the Rock Fight, Rock Fight, Rock Fight.
All right, so we're back today with Kyle Frost to talk about the Bureau of Economic Analysis and their recently released report stating that outdoor recreation in the United States is now worth over $1 trillion. Kyle publishes a regular outdoor industry and community-focused column on his website, hereandthere.club, and did a breakdown of the BEA's report last week. Welcome back, Kyle. What else is happening on over there on Here and There right now?
Well, I'll have a little overview of kind of recent developments with UTMB coming out this week. And my last week has mostly been spent poring over data tables and wrangling numbers in Excel to get anything meaningful out of this report. So that's what I've been doing.
Yeah, these larger outdoor conversations, I feel like, are gaining momentum. Some of it from the conversations you and I have been having. I've been getting a lot of feedback, which I want to get to maybe at the end of our conversation on like the backcountry situation and REI. So we're starting with the report itself. Can you just kind of walk us through what's in the report and like why is it important?
Yeah, so first, I think it's pretty important to define what exactly the report is. And outdoor recreation is what the Bureau of Economic Analysis calls a satellite account, which means that it's not an industry in and of itself, but rather a breakdown and little pieces of outdoor recreation related activity from a bunch of the other standardized industries, of which there's like 70 or something like that. You know, a lot of people like to say like, oh, 1.1 trillion, that's more than oil and gas. That's more than these other industries, which is true. But the outdoor recreation satellite account also contains economic impact from those industries that is related to outdoor recreation. So any like oil and gas on public lands like goes into this report. Like a good example is if I had 20 industries, each had $5 worth of GDP, and I took $1 from each of those that was outdoor recreation related. So now I can say that the outdoor industry has, $20 of economic impact. That's big. It is fair to say that it's big. It is fair to say that it's bigger than any of those individual $5. It's maybe not like a truly fair comparison. Second, there's a ton of different ways to slice and dice this data. The 1.1 trillion number is outdoor recreation gross output by activity in 2022 dollars. So that's basically the biggest number you're going to get. It does not take into account inflation. There is another table for all of these related statistics that benchmarks any kind of growth to 2017 dollars that does account for inflation. And then point three, this whole thing is so complicated. And point three is that outdoor recreation as defined by the BEA is probably much broader than most people think on the surface. So I think most outdoor enthusiasts tend to see outdoor recreation in a pretty narrow purview that's related to the activities that they participate in are the ones that they see regularly. So, hiking, biking, mountain biking, camping, visits to national parks, those sort of things. But in reality, recreation as defined in this report contains things like golf, pickleball. It contains, the driving to national parks. The gas is part of it. It could be any number of things. And I think that kind of maybe ties into kind of the next point here is like, what were the top, activities in the report?
Well, I want to table for a second the sort of complexity of the report, because I feel like, broadly speaking, that's to me the most interesting takeaway is how everyone is sort of using this and deploying it publicly and the messaging around it. But to kind of focus on it a little bit deeper, yeah. So, this is most of the stuff we talk about in this show is definitely human-powered sports. So let's talk about that for a second. Where does that show up? Like athletics, the things that we talk about mostly on the show. Where does that turn up in this report?
As far as like overall impact and the totem pole, I guess they're middling.
Well, that's it, folks. We're shutting her down.
The top like conventional, the category, the overarching category is called conventional outdoor recreation, and the top contributors in order are RVing, boating, motorcycling, ATV. Hunting and shooting, snow activities, and equestrian. So that rounds out the top 5. There's a pretty big decline from RVing and boating down to the rest of them. Mm-hmm. And then kind of the things that we would consider as like our personal core outdoor recreation, it kind of sits at like number 6 or 7, depending on which way you're slicing the data. Basically even with equestrian.
And where's cycling kind of come in on all that?
Cycling is a little bit lower than that.
That's crazy to me, because I just think about the breadth. Everybody has a bike, it just feels like. even people who don't do the stuff that we like to do typically own a bike, right? So I guess it's funny to think about that that's even lower on the list. But really, and what's the disparity between the economic impact of like RVing at number 1 and the economic impact of hiking, camping, climbing at number 6? It's a pretty big gap, isn't it?
Yeah. I think if you're using the 1.1 trillion, I think that climbing and hiking is about 10 billion and RVing is around 70 billion.
Yeah. Yeah.
Boating, fishing, somewhere around just above 60 billion.
So when people are all holier than thou about like I go up into the mountains and don't like to drive my car and camp in backcountry camp, it's like, well, maybe we should pay a little homage to the people who are truly driving the category for us.
Yeah, and when you like stop to think about it, it makes a lot of sense, right? Like, you buy a $150,000 Revel, a Revel camper van, which is going to go in an RV category, or a giant, one that you'll see in an RV park. Like that single purchase is going to account for way more chained economic activity than me buying a tent and, camping in the backcountry for free, or, for a $20 permit or something like that.
Right.
And that goes back into like how the report is compiled as well, because that RV that got bought or that boat that got bought also accounts for the materials that it took to create the parts, the people that built the RV, the people that got employed to build the RV, the lot that it sat on to get sold. And then, those people are spending more money in gas over time. RVers are spending longer in places than your general weekend road tripper. And so that's contributing more money. Those campgrounds are more expensive. So there's like a whole chain of activity that, explains why the things like RVs and boats and ATVs have a kind of an outsized impact. Mm-hmm. But again, if we want to talk about the 1.1 trillion number, you got to acknowledge where it's coming from.
So I kind of want to jump to like the so what of this thing, right? Because the impact is already kind of being felt in terms of like the public statements. You have, the Outdoor Recreation Roundtable claiming that this is anybody sort of on our side of the fence is claiming that this is a win for conservation, which I'm not saying it's not, but it's also so much more than just about a conservation effort or proof that people want more wilderness or anything like that. But every little sort of faction of the outdoors experience is sort of laying claim to this report in a way that kind of suits them. So as you look at this, like what will happen sort of across outdoor recreation as a result of this report from your perspective?
I mean, I think the biggest thing that it does is it provides like a singular place to point to and say that outdoor recreation is having a massive impact.
Right.
Whatever your definition of that happens to be, it's a massive impact. And, if you do look at the climbing, hiking, camping, that grew pretty significantly over the last couple of years, regardless if it is a smaller piece of the pie compared to some of these other things. And I think, this has been running since 2016 or 2017. Because it is coming from the Bureau of Economic Analysis, it is a widely respected, and the methodologies out there and all that, this is stuff that all industries use to measure different kinds of things. It makes it much easier to sell the idea of like outdoor recreation offices or more investment in, managing that type of activity in various states, whether that be through conservation or conversations across industries and at the state level.
So the Outdoor Recreation Roundtable is saying that the release of this report is definitely going to help America's Outdoor Recreation Act, which is a bipartisan supported initiative to, again, increase, outdoor recreation opportunities across the country. And again, that's probably a massive understatement the way I just put that. But I would imagine then having something like this in their back pocket, right, is going to kind of point to like, yeah, look, $1 trillion worth of our economy goes to this stuff. Let's pass this thing, right?
And the Outdoor Recreation Roundtable, I think, is a great example of like cross-industry collaboration for a lot of this kind of movement at the state and federal level, compared to what I would consider like a slightly more niche organization like the Outdoor Industry Association.
Yeah.
The Outdoor Rec Roundtable brings together all of the versions of the Outdoor Industry Association for everything, for RVs, for boating, for sport fishing, for hunting. And they're kind of acting like this kind of lobbying, conversation, facilitating organization to really push for growth and change and management at a broader level across the country, which is great.
Yeah, I think we need to have a conversation about the name, the Outdoor Industry Association. As someone who grew up thinking like, oh, this is the outdoor industry and it's only the stuff that we like, not even considering all of these other stuff, it's a little like, you didn't really think this through when you sort of laid claim to the moniker of the outdoors, the Outdoor Industry Association.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty funny when you break the whole thing down and see that there's amusement parks are in here, like festivals, concerts, and like anything that's outside, the beach, just in general, like anything at the beach falls into this category. It's pretty wild, the breadth of activity that's subsumed in the whole thing.
So when you do look at some of these things, though, and you think about what might be riding on the back of it, things like the proliferation of more access or conservation or the AORA, the act that we just discussed. Is there something disingenuous by them not sort of addressing head on things like oil and gas are contributors to this? Because I do, we're kind of a sensitive group over here, right? And I think somebody might see that or hear about that down the road and kind of question the whole thing, even if it's just like, it's just kind of, of course, that's part of it.
I'm not sure if I would definitely call it disingenuous. Like I said, oil and gas is part of this. It is not a massive percentage of this by any means. Like retail is basically one of like the largest group of industry category. I do think that a lot of outlets don't get past the summary that the BEA puts out, and therefore the writers have no idea what's actually in the report. So I think that a lot of that is more a function of someone spending half an hour to read the summary and say, hey, here are the top states and it's 1 trillion and here are the top activities and be done, rather than opening up the actual data tables and being like, wow, there's a lot of stuff in here. Like,
Right.
I was a little critical of, I think it was a Gear Junkie article that was decently long, but just completely wrong. Like, it was just, like, that's being harsh, but they kept referring to things as growth instead of like change, which are two different things. Like, a growth percentage is different than this is X and this is Y. And there were just a lot of references to things like that were crossing different data tables and referring to things that aren't what they are as in the data.
Right.
And I do think that that's hard. Like, I mean, there's a lot of people that don't have the time to go through these things. And I mean, I spent forever in Excel just to like figure out what the rates of change were and figure out what the, top change percentages were from 2019 to 2020 or 2021 to 2022, because it's just a bunch of numbers. Like, they're not giving you the nice, concise, like, here's what, hunting grew 25%. It's like, no, I got to go in there and figure out the Excel formulas and that kind of stuff. It's complicated. I, at least personally, have kind of gone into these the last couple of years because I find it really interesting. And I think it's useful to try and surface the interesting tidbits that you're not going to get in a 200-word summary about the industry being $1 trillion.
Well, and look, like we talked about, like, this is all, I'm sure, being poured over behind the scenes. People who are in Washington and do all these things and have a real, this is their job, right? Is to kind of, take this information and parlay it into something that benefits their stakeholders who are out there RVing or skiing or whatever it is that they do. But not to get negative about it, but I just I think it's a nuanced conversation. But in my research anyway, the most in-depth breakdown of this report was your article. And not to say like that's a good thing. I'm glad that you did it, but nobody else even really seemed to attempt, and there was just sort of I'm interested in knowing this, because I think that when I do look at the sort of even in just the industry side, if you're just a person who likes to go outside, maybe you don't care. But I think about these conversations we're having and the ongoing debate about, trade shows and the role of all these things. And it's like, right, but now, we've talked, I think you and I chatted about last week about the economic conferences and all the things that are happening on the state level. And I want to talk a little bit about that here too. But it's just like these details really matter, and it kind of can shape, how we do things going forward. It seems like everybody seems very happy to kind of keep the status quo of what the outdoors is, at least on the human powered side of things.
I mean, yes and no. I think organizations like the Outdoor Recreation Roundtable, they go far into depth on this stuff. They're working on legislation. They're
Sure
working with everybody. They're diving into this stuff. I think the difference comes when most of the outlets don't have any incentive to challenge people's preconceptions about what the industry is or how they currently think about the industry. And like, that's what you see in Outside and Gear Junkie and, even the Outdoor Industry Association literally published like 180 words or something about this whole report.
Isn't that a problem though? Isn't that kind of who we rely on for our news in this space?
Yeah, I think it's why I started a newsletter that was like, hey, like, let's get past the surface level of these things. And the industry deserves to have voices that cause you to challenge how you think about certain things, rather than providing you with just enough stuff to like reshare and be like, oh, 1.1 trillion is a big number and great. And I've now stopped thinking about it.
Right.
And rather than being like, like, wow, like a lot of this economic impact is like trips and travel and like flights and gas and those kinds of things. And it's not necessarily how much we spent at REI last year.
Right.
If I can get people to like think about things for, another 2 minutes to be like, oh, wow, that's kind of interesting. Maybe next time something like this comes up, I'll have like another couple seconds to consider what the implications are. Then for me, I've succeeded. it is a consistent problem in the discourse in the industry that
100%.
this level of analysis does not happen very often by the outlets with the most reach.
Well, and I think that's where, and number one, like that's the exact same reason I started this show. Even the more lighter topics, like, I did a thing on e-mountain biking yesterday, and some of that was tongue in cheek, some of that was just me venting frustrations, and some of that is because I haven't seen any of these opinions stated by anybody else. So I'm like, well, I'm just going to put my opinion out there too. And I think so. Even on the more lighter side, kind of the same premise of why, like, you started your newsletter, why we started this podcast, and it's. I don't know. I think some of it is kind of our outdoor world, I think, has been made to almost feel small because it's sort of like, it's adventure sports. Not everyone goes and does this stuff. But if nothing else, this report proves that no, going outside is big business. It has major impact, and it crosses, even if we're number 6 on the list, we're on the list. It's like we have this reach. It is important. So how we cover it, like why we do just to kind of sit back and be like, well, here's another article about, I'm going to write 2,000 words on this, Ohio trail runner. Or you could break down the freaking report that's going to shape the future of outdoors, which is really kind of what this could be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really think that it's important that, like, I'm not digging into this report and it's like, oh, people are wrong. Like,
no, you're just providing context.
The context is important. The, like, understanding, like, where the growth is important. And I think, like I said, like, challenging your preconceived notions of what the economic drivers in the industry are, because the industry has a tendency to be pretty judgy.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And myself included, right?
Dude, I just yelled at all the e-mountain bikers yesterday.
Golf courses, like, they just take up so much. They take up so much land and water and yada yada. But, like, if you look at the economic impact by state,
right,
of the outdoor recreation industry, by the definition in this report, Florida's number 2. Colorado, like the outdoorsy state, is 12.
Right.
And a lot of that is because of things like golf, Disney World, or the entire city of Orlando, like amusement parks, all of that, the beach.
Which, by the way, we have to get over our bias, right? Because, I said this for a long time. It's not, outdoor used to mean something different 20, 30 years ago. Now it's true. Like, your generation probably is the start of it. My kids' generation definitely is anything outside is outdoor. So like you said, don't look down your nose at golf. You don't have to like golf.
Well, let's clarify that. That doesn't mean we can't criticize golf. Right?
Oh, I will always criticize golf and pickleball. We've criticized pickleball a lot on this podcast, and we'll continue to do so.
Guilty as charged. I am in on pickleball.
I'm afraid to play because I think I know how much I'll like it if I start playing. So I'm just going to keep shitting on it until, like, one day I break down and actually play it and have to, like, take back every mean thing I said about pickleball.
Yeah, I am all in.
But there's a roadmap here, right? I mean, just glancing through it myself, I didn't spend nearly the time on it that you did. But you look at, the states that have an outdoor recreation office, right? And there's definitely ones that I thought that did, like California, who don't. And then you can start playing the game like, well, okay, is that the 5th largest economy thing? They don't think they need to. I don't know why they wouldn't. It just seems like, that also seems like something that California would.
It's the largest state by impact for outdoor rec.
Right. So maybe they're like, we got this. But then you have Idaho who doesn't, and you see them, they're surrounded by states who do. And what else is there to do in Idaho except go to the rivers and mountains and stuff like that? So why wouldn't they? So is there a group in Idaho right now who's looking at it going, see, we told you so, we need to get on this?
Oh, for sure. And I think, like, one of the most important ways that the data is broken down here is looking at how important outdoor recreation was to each state relative to their GDP. And so if you look at the overall dollar impact, you get California, you get Florida, you get New York, you get Texas. But if you look at the impact relative to GDP, you'll see Hawaii, Vermont, Montana, Wyoming, like Alaska. These are all places where that impact has an oversized influence on the entire state. And I think especially for places, like you mentioned, Idaho is a good example. the more that this data comes out, is like, hey, maybe it's not the biggest part of, the entire country, but it's got a huge influence on your state's economy. And because of that, it deserves a more personal touch, a more thoughtful approach to actually managing that activity with regards to conservation, tourism, strategies of promotion, and that kind of stuff. And hopefully that leads to more offices across the country.
Yeah, I think the other thing too is you look at, this is where, you can get into the nitty gritty of like capitalist society and what works and what should be. It's like, well, or you can make the system work for you, right? And this is totally off the cuff. I don't have anything to back this up, but you look at, states in the Southeast who traditionally have been lagging behind in things like probably tourism and education and things like that, who always, rank low in sort of important social metrics. Well, and then if you take this report, you pair it with, and I understand, the Walmart family was involved, but it's like, you look what's going on in Bentonville. I never, for the life of me, would have thought something in Arkansas was a place that I would want to go visit, to go mountain biking, maybe something else there. So you take all of these little, case studies, and now if you're in a community in Mississippi, Alabama, wherever, where maybe there's, a need for, how do we bring people in? How do we get an injection of money into our economy? You know what? Build some outdoor recreation opportunities, because it exists everywhere. There's things to do everywhere. I used to get angry at the old guard of the outdoor industry, where it's like, oh, the outdoors only happens in like 6 places. It's like, no, man, there is stuff everywhere if you just go seek it out. So, yeah, I'd love to see some more conversations about that. And I'm definitely going to be reaching out to the Outdoor Recreation Roundtable, and hopefully have somebody on in the future to kind of talk a little bit more about how this will get deployed either locally or nationally, because I think that's really what's important here. And it's just get over yourself and your biases, accept it all, and understand that all of it, this is maybe the best example ever of the rising tide lifting all boats.
Yeah, I mean, the rising tide lifting all boats, but also being more aware of how things will have to be managed as we move forward in the future. Because, if you're thinking about conservation and climate change and our overall impact and those sorts of things, if you want to manage tourism, and you might end up trying to decrease the amount of RVs on the road, which affects the top line of this whole thing again. And it's not to be said that these things need to go away, but it should inform how we approach those kinds of strategies, recognizing that they have an impact, a monetary impact on jobs, on GDP, on, visitation and those sorts of things. That, there's a balance to be struck between the economic impact of tourism and the outdoor recreation industry and conservation and all that stuff. So.
All right, man. Well, thanks for coming on again. Thanks for your hard work digging into this report. It seems like one of the few folks who actually did on the media side. So appreciate you doing that and sharing your findings with us.
Yeah, always a good time. And, I hope it was worth it digging through all that data and all those numbers.
I think it is. I think it's incredible. I mean, there's so much interesting stuff in there, and it kind of it tells the actual story of the thing we're constantly talking about in our daily lives.
Yeah, I think that sums it up well.
All right, man. We'll see you next week.
See ya.
All right, that's our show for today. Did you enjoy this episode of The Rock Fight? If so, or even if you didn't, please click follow wherever you are listening and leave a 5-star review. And if you're feeling extra generous, drop a quick comment. Thank you so much for even considering doing any of that. Big thanks to Kyle Frost for again coming on The Rock Fight. Kyle is one of the most unique voices in outdoor media, and you can head over to hereandthere.club to subscribe to his newsletter. The Rock Fight is a production of Rock Fight LLC. I'm Colin True. Thanks for listening, and here to take us out is Krista Makes from Less Than Jake with the Rock Fight fight song. We'll see you next time.
Rock fight.